Okay, in 1933, my Uncle Herb, who was a logger, came to work in Grants for Bill Prestridge. And they logged from, out at, what is it?
McGaffey or?
Well, no, out in Zuni Canyon. And they had that before the railroad. And Dad came to work for the White Arrow Garage. And for Bill Prestridge, who owned that also. Bill's father-in-law was Chalky Breeze, and he had a box factory down about where Diamond G is now. And then we lived in Breezetown for a time until Dad bought the garage down on Santa Fe. And when we came, why, he and Mom were not married yet. And we stayed at Mother Whiteside, the hotel. Dad and Uncle Herb had a couple of rooms out back. And so we stayed there and didn't know, well, before we had come to Grants, we were baptized Methodist by a Baptist minister. Then we went to a Catholic school, and that's what makes a good Presbyterian. And so anyway, we lived there, and that was something again. Mother Whiteside was one terrific person, and her daughter, Lucy Jane, was a teacher at the grade school. And so we got to ride with Lucy Jane to school once in a while. And you should have seen Mother Whiteside's table. She served it family style, and everybody sat down at the same table and passed the potatoes and meat and everything else. And also, when Mr. Stewart and Ruth and Virginia came to Grants, W.W. came as superintendent for the high school, and they stayed there for a little bit until they found a house. And so there were many people, and so Dad got this garage down on Santa Fe, down below the hill, and this Grants was written up in Ripley's, believe it or not, that it was the longest town and the most narrow town in the United States. It was 4 miles long, 1 block wide. So, and then that garage, Dad was quite good at that, and we went to high school here, and 1930 was the first graduating class of the high school, Grants Union High School. I had the program, but I gave it to somebody, now I can't remember who, but I do have some pictures of that used to hang in the hallway at the high school, and I will get those to you and let you have those. And I think that's probably pretty much it. Oh, well, I will say this. My mom and dad, Mom died the 23rd of November, 1982, and Dad died the 20th of December, 1982, and he died of a broken heart, because he missed Mom so bad. And their birthdays were 8 days apart, and their death dates 25 days apart. And that's the end of us Hawkinsons.
I'm back and forth a lot, helping Mom out, but I don't get to see a lot of people. Some of the older people, it's nice to see you again. People my generation to reconnect, harass everyone. But this is wonderful. It's exciting to see all of the things that Grants is doing to try to preserve their history, so I applaud you all for that. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the Abraham gun side of the family. So my grandmother, Jessie Gunn, came from Laguna, born in 1894. Tamita Atzi from Laguna, and John Gunn, who was born in Ohio. He was from a family who, Randy has done a lot of our genealogy. Their people came from Scotland to Ohio, and there were 8 children, and 3 brothers came to New Mexico, to Laguna, as surveyors, ranchers, and one went on to California. The rest stayed in Ohio. John was a surveyor and met and married Nita. He lived there in Laguna, and then I believe they started a flour mill as well. Nita came from a family of 7 children there in Laguna. Kenneth came from a family of 8. They had 7 children, of which my grandmother was the oldest. And as it goes, of those 7 children, so Grandma married my grandfather, Siegfried Abraham, who had emigrated from Germany. Ended up as a mercantile. I believe he came and worked for Alfred Bose in Bernalillo, who was his brother-in-law, and came selling merchandise in Laguna, and met my grandmother, and they married. Her next youngest sister, Aggie, also met and married a German immigrant, Sidney Gottlieb. Then there was John Gunn, who worked on the farm or ranch. Florence Gunn, who had health issues. She had rheumatoid arthritis, but she was an artist. She carved, she painted, and Kenneth Colin Gunn, his brother Robert, was a scientist, engineer, and he and his wife took in Aunt Florence, and she lived out in California the majority of her life and then would come home and visit. Colin Bruce Gunn worked for the federal government and traveled around. Lottie Nita Gunn married Diego Abeda from Isleta, who was very prominent in water conservancy. And the youngest child was Wally Gunn, who married Mary Milan. So the Milans and the Abrahams are all family, in-laws and outlaws. When the 3 brothers came to Laguna, they had a farm, or a ranch, Bar 15 Ranch, south of Highway 6. And so the kids were all raised out on the ranch. Colin died in 1920. And then Grandma Mita married the brother John in 1923. And they continued raising the kids that were still in the family home. I believe as the story was told, they were living out on the ranch. It was in the winter, coming back in. I don't know if one of the kids was sick. They were coming by wagon, got stuck, so he had to carry the child or the children walking to get them back to Laguna. He got sick and then ultimately died from pneumonia, I believe. Mita's family, she was one of 7. Her parents were John Atsey and Yaz was the mother. It's lots of, as we're trying, and you know, in Native country, we have our own census records when you register with the tribe as a tribal member. But in terms of being, we weren't recognized, this country was, or the state was not a state early on, but Indian territories were not acknowledged as members of the state. And so trying to get records, trying to figure out stuff has been quite challenging, and Randy has done a lot. And now through oral history and stuff, trying to identify who everyone was and how the lineages all went. Here we have a picture of Nita, Kenneth, and my grandma, Jessie. She was the oldest. Okay. This was Siegfried and my Aunt Beck. Siegfried also died at a very young age. So Jessie and Siegfried had 3 children. Beck, Rebecca, who was named for Siegfried's mother, my dad, Jake, our dad, and then the youngest, Diddy or Ruth. And Beck was 8 years older than Daddy and Diddy, and they're a year apart. So she was, I'm sure, the apple of her dad's eye. He did take her to Germany, so she got to meet the family over there. We have many letters that were written because they did stay in contact. Randy's going to talk about the Abraham side of the family, so you'll hear about their history, their demise in the Holocaust, and all of that. But Beck was fortunate that she was able to venture over there and meet that side of the family. She then married Joe Fernandez, who, as we talk about being related and interrelated, so Joe is from the Milan side of the family. Aunt Mary, Joe's mom, I'm blanking on her name. Salvadora.
Lala for short.
Yeah, Grandma Lala was Aunt Mary's sister. And so Aunt Mary and Uncle Wally, and then Beck and Joe, so double related. And then they had 3 boys, but they took over running Laguna Mart, this family store at Laguna. And then it was passed on down to Ronnie, the oldest boy, until it was closed. But, so this was Siegfried. He died, as I said, when Daddy was 8. And then, 7?
6.
And then, take a pic.
He died when I was young.
They were still living out at the ranch or in Laguna, back and forth, involved with the ranch still. And Grandma married Virgil Harrington a few years later. Daddy was always out at the ranch with them, and actually, I think they were doing cattle work. We're at a watering hole. Virgil, I don't know if he got down from the horse or was on the horse, but they got caught in quicksand, and Daddy witnessed Virgil drowning in quicksand at age 10. So I don't remember how many years after that then, before she married Claude Humphreys, another cattleman, rancher who had been involved with the Bureau in range management out here for a number of years. And then he died in 1959. But here we have Grandma Mita, then the 3 girls, Aunt Lottie, 3 girls and Uncle John, my grandma, and then Aunt Flissy. So of the 7 children, there were 4. So Grandma lived to be 100 and she died right before her 103rd birthday. She was strong, vibrant, and a force to be reckoned with. I can remember one time Mom and Daddy giving me hell about something I was doing. And finally I just turned to them and looked and started laughing, and I said, "What do you expect? I come by this honestly." So it's all because of them and their life's experiences and longevity and strength that we are who we are today.
So I'm Bertie's daughter, Randy, and I do have a great interest in genealogy and family history. And over time, I've learned some really great stories about the family. And one of the things Grandma Jessie would say is, "You know, I only married 3 times, but I could have married a lot more. I just didn't like any of those men." So that was quite fun. The other interesting thing about Grandma is she lived in Laguna, and Laguna wasn't a big shopping area. And so if you would happen to stop by and say, "Do you want to go to town?" before you finished the sentence, she was ready with her purse to go. So you always made sure you were ready to take Grandma shopping. So the Gunn family came from Scotland. And I found out that a portion of them actually were loyalists in the American Revolution, and so they ended up settling in Canada, because if they had stayed in America, they would have been persecuted or hung for treason. But the Gunns were from Scotland. The Atsey line, which is where Mita comes from, were from Laguna area, native. Jessie was a combination of the Gunns and the Atseys. Her husband, Siegfried, came from Germany, and he immigrated in 1913. He came to Bernalillo. His brother-in-law had a store there, Adolf Voss, and was part of the Voss cattle company, is my understanding. And many of those people settled in southern New Mexico. But Siegfried came. His sister, Frida, was living with her husband, Adolf. Siegfried worked for them and did traveling sales, and that's how he met Jessie as he traveled to Laguna. So they married and had 3 children. Subsequent to Siegfried settling in New Mexico, their younger brother came. His name was Arthur, and he helped Siegfried with his store. One of the interesting facts is to help secure this store, they had a bear, and they had a guard bear, not a guard dog. And it looked like a big black bear, and you could see pictures of it outside the store. I'm told it was friendly. I would hope so. Siegfried did die young. This is a picture of him, I believe, in his World War I uniform. Both he and Arthur, I'm told, fought in World War I with the Germans and then immigrated. Actually, you know what? That wouldn't be true, because if he came in 1913, that would have been before the war. So this might have been a student day. It is Siegfried, not Arthur. Arthur and Siegfried's parents were Rebecca and Jacob. They were Jewish in faith and by blood. That's them on the left. Jacob, the father, was also in sales. He had a grocery store, a mercantile store. His son-in-law took that business over. You can see Arthur on the right. And we're not sure who the lady is, whether that's one of his sisters or a girlfriend. The picture didn't identify them, so we're still trying to figure that one out. Subsequent to Siegfried's death, apparently there was a falling out about the business or some family affair, and Arthur went to New York, and we never heard from him again. Through records, we know that he registered for World War II, and I understand that he died in New York, but we, as our family, never heard from him, so that was kind of a sad story for us. Their sister Hedwig stayed in Germany, and through letters, we know that they had a pretty good life up until the mid-1930s, when the winds of war started. She and her family were transported to death camps, and as far as we can tell, they were exterminated. Interestingly enough, at that time, as many of you know, many Jews were transported to camps. We have an uncle, Nathan, who was 84 years old. They took out of a nursing home and sent him to a camp. So, yeah, that's kind of a tender moment. But Jessie prevailed, as Terry mentioned. She did remarry. She raised her children. They stayed in the area. And through genealogy and through history, you know, you never talk poorly about anyone because you're probably talking to one of their relatives. And they might be your relative too. Go ahead, Terry. So this is Mom and Daddy. August 18th, 1949, they married. The Abrahams and the Hawkinson merged. And they had you can't really see that. They had 4 children who they tried to instill values in, and as Mom likes to say, she became a Presbyterian who raised 2 Mormons and 2 Catholics. We're grateful that they chose to be married and to have children and not drowned us at birth. And are grateful for our history. Thank you. Did you have a question?
I had a question for Bertie. Bertie, I remember there used to be a sawmill right behind where the police station is now, and there was another one out where North Hills was, and then you have the property across from the Gutierrez Medical Center. Can you kind of tell us what was going on out in that area before it became a housing area?
Actually, it was nothing. Matt or McNatt owned it. Dad bought it from him, and then Dad sold some of it to Jack Stagner later, but it was several years. And the house they built was built with railroad ties, and it's quite nice, small but nice. And sawmill, well, Melvin's dad And Stan Hayden had a sawmill out in the Zunies. And out toward the ice caves, I believe, wasn't it, Melvin?
Yeah.
And then there was a sawmill, H.B. Hawkins had, well, out, let's see, where was it? About where the houses are, Four Hills, I guess. And that was the two sawmills I know. And also at one time, they floated logs down here where the baby shopping center was. And I think,
That was New Mexico Timber Company.
excuse me?
That was New Mexico Timber Company.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I think Mary and Alton Head had the first house, no, Bill and Hattie Baker had a house up on the hill above, let's see, about where the police station is now. And Mary and Alton Head had one down Mud Flats, as it was called at that time. Any other questions?
Where now would the garage have been on Santa Fe? What is there that we can relate to that would tell us where the garage was?
Where the garage was?
Uh-huh.
Well, it is still standing.
Which building, what's in it
Was the
then?
Ford dealership for a while on Santa
Oh,
Fe?
it's been,
Okay.
yes, Ford dealership and several Ford dealerships. And then Corley's had a Chrysler
Oh, okay,
dealership there.
okay.
I'd just like to say that I got to meet Jessie when I was a young kid, when she was married to Claude Humphreys,
Uh-huh.
and they lived at the Red Lake Ranch.
Okay.
And my dad worked in the same area, so we used to visit back and forth when I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you like to go shopping then?
Yeah, well, we were too far out in the country to go shopping. But they had a nice place at the Red Lake Ranch, and
Okay.
we used to go and visit. And they always helped each other with branding and so forth, so.
Well, Jessie said she used to ride a horse over to Magdalena
Yeah.
to visit.
Oh, there's the picture of the White Arrow garage.
Oh,
I'll be darned.
and here's a picture of the White Arrow garage.
Looks a little different now.
I'd like to pass it around and look at it.